Hey everyone, my name is Matt and I'm a computer gaming addict. I'm also an alcoholic, addicted to drugs and anything I can get my hand on, whether it be pills or whatever. And so what I was like, about 5 years old, I was introduced to Nintendo, started playing, and I remember getting very angry when I started playing the fighting games, and I would get very, very angry. I would be throwing my controllers at the wall and I would be screaming at God. I say, God, I hate you. Why do you do this to me? And I was so frustrated because nothing was going my way. And the only way I could get my way was by playing video games. That's how I felt like I can be in control. My dad abused me physically and mentally for a good portion of my life, and I eventually stopped playing Nintendo and I started playing computer games with my sisters. And my sisters, I have two sisters, one older, one younger, and I remember fighting over the computer all the time, and it seemed like it was never, my turn was never long enough, and it seemed like they were always on longer, but it was really me being in control, and I had the computer most of the time. Eventually, I grew out of that as well, and I got an Xbox, and I started playing Xbox, and I was staying up very late at about 12 years old, and through elementary school, I got held back in kindergarten because I wasn't keeping up with the rest of the kids, and through elementary school, I was coming to school late all the time. I felt very embarrassed because I couldn't make it on time. My dad was always keeping me up late, and my mom couldn't get me to school on time. And I just went through all the fighting and so it really took a toll on my mind. And so I would always turn in homework late, and so by the time I got to middle school, I was playing Xbox and just kind of doing my own thing. Very, very shy. Didn't really talk to very many people. I did have friends, but I mostly just played my Xbox. And by the time I got into seventh grade, I was introduced to a computer game, which later on became the one game that I would be addicted to for nearly 15 years. And I didn't want to have anything to do with any other game because it was a waste of time, because I had a new life in this game. And by the time I got to high school, ninth grade, I missed up to 45 days in my first semester. And it was me. I also got into smoking cigarettes and alcohol and drugs. And that's all I wanted to do. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't care about my life. And I was only 15 at that time, or 14. And then I turned 15, and it just progressed more and more from there. And like the game that I started playing was an MMORPG game, and I started drinking also with my dad, and I had friends that came over, and they thought my dad was so cool because he was so funny, and he bought us alcohol and gave us cigarettes, and I hated my dad. He humiliated me in front of my friends all the time, and it was just horrible. We got in fights. And then, so eventually as I progressed through high school, I went to summer school every summer, and I failed that too. And it wasn't working out. I got in a fight with someone at school, and then I went to an alternative school for a year. And then I came back to high school after that, still was failing. And I got to my senior year, and I knew I wasn't going to graduate. And it was just very sad to see all my peers like doing well and graduating. And I felt like I had no hope whatsoever. I wasn't getting any help. And if I were getting any help, I was minimizing any attention on me whatsoever. Like I would just unplug the phone from so the school couldn't call me and leave messages for my parents to find out I was skipping school. I remember just being away from school for hours till like 6 in the morning before school started, and then I would pretend like I'm going to school, and then I would just go hide somewhere in the house or outside. Yeah, I would just wait for hours until my parents had left, and then I would come back inside and start playing my game, and yeah, like I couldn't function without it. Um, so after I didn't high school, after that, I felt like I said, yes, I got all this free time now. I can do whatever I want. And I remember being like very young in high school, feeling so hopeless and depressed, and I knew like I was powerless, but I couldn't admit it. Um, yeah, once I started, I just could not stop. Like I eventually got a job like 4 years after high school. It took me 4 years to get a job, and I just fell into whatever would take me, and which was a construction temp agency. And so I became a laborer, and it was good for me because I didn't have to go to work every day. I could just do whatever I wanted, and I was living with my and they didn't really care what I did. My mom cared, but she was very passive. I remember fighting with my mom um, all the time about being on the computer, and she would hide the keyboard from me, and I would spend hours in the night looking for the keyboard and or the mouse, or she'd set passwords and I'd figure them out. And yeah, I just did the most most sneakiest things. Yeah, and then I was starting to drink alcohol heavily, and I started to steal my parents' cars, and I stole their wallets. I stole their credit cards and like I went into my mom's purse while she was asleep, and I would just steal money every night. And same with my dad. I could just pull his wallet out of his back pocket while he was blacked out or just unconscious, and I could just take his debit card, go to the bank. I knew his password. And yeah, I started getting money to keep getting high so I could play my video games, and getting drunk so I could play my video games. And it just became this ritual where I wanted to, like what I did in the games, I would fight people online. It got my heart racing. So I had the ritual of I would drink a beer or take a shot, and then I'd go smoke a bowl, and then smoke a cigarette, and then jump back on my game. And if I had pills or cocaine, I would do that with it. And yeah, it was just a very sad life. And I remember just hating myself forever and realizing that this isn't going to be a very long life if I keep living this way. But I had no hope, so I just figured that eventually it was going to end sometime, and because I knew I couldn't live like this forever. And yeah, so I became suicidal. And I remember being on a construction site where I was going to, like, all my friends that I had left were heroin addicts and speedballers. And I wasn't, because I played my games, and yeah, so I avoided all of that. But they were my friends, and they hid it from me as well. I knew if I ever tried it, that I would be hooked for life, or I would, yeah, just end up dying that way. So I eventually came to a point where I was done with life, and I wanted to go to my friends and next door and just be like, yeah, give me some heroin. I wanna do some. And so I was like a couple days away from doing that. I had it all planned out. I wanted to overdose, and this girl came on this construction site. She didn't belong there. She was actually, like, her dad was a real estate agent, owned a real estate agency, and it was interesting, like, how we met. And so we ended up hanging out, and she actually opened up my world. Like, she ended up telling me about some of my character defects. She was very transparent. She told me that I was passive, and then when she broke up with me, she said, yeah, I think you're just seeking this instant gratification, and your actions speak louder than your words do, really. And that was it. She was gone. She moved to France. And yeah, and after that, I eventually quit smoking cigarettes. Like a year later, well, actually, before that, I came to CGAA in 2015 out of utter desperation, and I got myself a sponsor within like the first 5 minutes, and I did not want hear what the program had to offer, I wasn't open-minded, and so I continued to moderate for 2.5 more years. Yeah, so like, and then the following summer of after that, I did quit smoking cigarettes just for that girl because I wanted to prove to her, and it wasn't for me actually, and she actually never even knew about it, but I did it, and then I started getting on this health kick where I was like trying all this self-help stuff, and I was trying to quit watching pornography. I had a really bad pornography addiction, and yeah, I was trying to get accountability partners online, and it wasn't working. And then for 2 more years, I was trying to moderate my drinking, my smoking, and yeah, I had quit cigarettes though, and so about 2 years later, after quitting cigarettes, I quit drinking alcohol on willpower alone, and then I quit smoking weed a month later, and yeah, it was I had support. That's how I did it, but it wasn't enough because I didn't have the identification that I do with the fellowship, and so yeah, like I came to the group 2.5 years later, and in utter desperation again, and I had relapsed on video games again. I tried to quit and I couldn't. Like I would do all these things to like stop gaming, and it wasn't working. And so yeah, once I came back to the fellowship, I was open-minded. I was willing to do whatever it takes to have this what other people have, and I tried to act like I wasn't like anyone in the beginning, but I found that this is exactly what I needed, and I did my first step, and I felt so relieved after that first step, and just having the identification with other people that understood me for the first time. It was truly life-changing. That did shift my perspective a lot, and it was a little easier for me to stay off games in the beginning because I did have a full-time job at that point, working for a construction company, and I was still a laborer. 5 years later, almost 5 years later, I was still a laborer. I never moved up in construction. I was always cleaning up after other trades and doing all the things that no one else wanted to do. So once I found this fellowship, like everything changed. Like I was able to get the support I needed. I was no longer minimizing my attention. I learned about the disease, how it's a twofold illness. Like it starts with an obsession in the mind, and then once I start playing, it turns into a craving where I can't stop. And I learned that that is actually normal for all addictions. It's an actual physical and mental disease in the mind, and then I started to learn about the neurology of it, and it totally just makes sense to me now. Um, yeah, so so I was also given the solution, which was the 12 steps, the spiritual program, and I put off steps for a long time, too long actually, and so I haven't completed them all, but I'm still working on that. And like, yeah, I ended up quitting my job 6 months later. Well, actually, first I moved out of my mom's house for the first time. My sponsor helped me. Like I was just being open with my sponsor, telling about all these things that are going on and how I wanted to do these things. And my sponsor helped me through it. And I moved out of my mom's house, realizing that we had a codependency thing going on, and yeah, like I moved into a clean and sober house, and I had a financial coach as well to get me out of debt, and so I was in a lot of debt, and then I started saving money and lived my life for the first time. Like I just felt like I stepped into a new world, like I got a second chance at life. And so once I realized that, I felt so much younger, and then eventually like I quit my job that I was very like self-sabotaging myself with, because I began to have other interests in nutrition and fitness, and the way I was living with working with these people that were very like kind of bullies, and I actually had some people that were very had traumatized me in lots of ways, and yeah, it was time for me to move on, and then 2 months after that, I got myself into another country. I came to Australia to travel, and I had a lot of money saved up because of that, because of the fellowship. Like I learned to set boundaries, and I learned to have discipline. I learned to have all these other things. Like it was, I had guidance for the first time in my life, and that was exactly what I needed. And I also had faith in a higher power. Like no matter what happens, I can do it. So now I'm in another country, and I've been in Australia for 5 months now, traveling on my own, solo traveling, and it's the greatest experience ever. I've been growing a lot in different ways. Like it wasn't easy at the beginning because I was on my own in a new world, and I struggled a lot in the beginning, especially finding out that the time zone difference wasn't going to work out as well as I had hoped, and so I wasn't able to get the support when I needed it, and I found myself in like hostels with a bunch of people partying and wanting me to party with them, and I realized that I couldn't be around hostels anymore, and yeah, it's big. Like I eventually got into volunteer organizations, and I started volunteering in exchange for a cultural experience and accommodation and food, so I could afford me a longer travel time. And so that's what I've been doing. And yeah, I bought a car, and I built it up to be able to camp in on my own, and I had help with that too. But so now I'm kind of traveling on my own. I also met a lot of hosts that were not very good hosts, and I did become disconnected from the fellowship, and I felt very complacent. Like I didn't know, like I lost my sense of purpose because I was in these areas where I didn't have any access to like fellowship. I had no phone service for a couple weeks, and I was just at a very low bottom again, and then I felt this overwhelming desire to go to an AA meeting, and I never went to AA meetings. In fact, when I first came to CJA, the second time I came to CJA, I couldn't even talk in the meetings. I was so afraid to talk at all. It's actually I have a year sobriety now. Last week was my birthday and my 1 year sobriety mark for gaming addiction, and it's just amazing to see how far I've come in just the last year. I was totally in desperation last year, like not knowing anything. Like, yeah, it's a huge difference. It's like I wouldn't have been able to recognize myself back then. I came to AA meetings. I started going to AA meetings here in Australia because I needed that face-to-face support, and like that has changed my life a lot. I actually got a meeting, and this guy from the fellowship invited me to his house, and we started, like I couldn't ask for anything else more than that. Like I started to feel so much hope also when I got there. Like this is exactly what I needed too, like the face to face, and it's real time for me as well, instead of just the phone meetings, which the phone meetings is like a huge blessing to me, the mumble. But I I've just come such a long ways. Like I practice, my personality traits have changed. Like I've become like interested in others. Like I'm not selfish as I used to be. Like I'm more honest and open, and that gets me farther than I could have imagined. Like just being honest, open, and willing to be honest and open, and willing to do the things that are suggested to me, become a lot more considerate of others and more giving, and I take more action. I have faith to do things that I am afraid of, like I like the fear of the unknown, but I will never know what I'm going to get if I don't try. Like 100% shots not taken are like I'm gonna miss 100% of the shots I don't take, basically. And so I have to go as far as I can see, even though I don't know what's on the other side. The fellowship is very important to me. My higher power is very important to me. And yeah, like I couldn't ask for anything else. Like this is a true blessing for me to be traveling, and I have plans to travel more of the world in the future as well. So yeah, I'm just really grateful that I have you guys here to listen to me and support me. Like I almost feel bad for um, other people who aren't like addicts, because a lot of people don't get the support they really need, and this is just huge. This is a real blessing. So anyways, that's all I'm going to share, and thank you so much for listening.